Good afternoon. Welcome everybody. I'm happy that it's a full house again. My name is Broderick. I'm head of the industry office of IDFA. And this is our third industry talk today. And it's about distribution. It's the future about distribution. Everything you should know. Please come in, shuffle in, find a chair. I'm very pleased to welcome here two distinguished gentlemen who have lots of experience in the field of documentary, both coming from I would say, a bit a different angle. First, Jan Röfekamp, who's a sales agent based in Canada. His company is Films Transit. We've been working with Jan for many, many years, actually from the very start of the festival. We showed films which he was representing as a sales agent. And so he's around, how many years? 25, 30?
I started the sales company in 1982.
So, lots of experience. And of course, over the years, the whole landscape when it comes to filmmaking, but also very much when it comes to film distribution has changed. So, Jan was there all the time. So he will share his knowledge about this changing landscape. And then, sitting over there is Peter Broderick, who I've met 10 years ago. We just figured out it was 10 years ago when he gave a presentation about distribution, which was totally new for me. It gives me lots of new insights. It was at Silver Dogs, and he was taking distribution from the angle of a filmmaker, where a filmmaker could do much more than they would ever think of. And he is still doing all these consulting on distribution and how to include yourself much more as a filmmaker or a producer, and to keep it in your own hands and to work yourself on the distribution of a film. So I hope you will have an interesting afternoon with these two gentlemen, and hope there's also time later for lots of questions. So please.
All right.
Thank you.
There we go. Hear me? Yes. Now, if Peter Wintonic would have been here introducing us, he would have introduced us as the gospel of documentary, apostles Peter and John. He would have done it. I'm sure of that. I am a Film Transit sales company out of Montreal, a long time. I'm not a very good speaker for an hour long. Like, I always need somebody to keep me on a track. So Peter's going to keep me on the track to go a little bit through the history, what has changed over all these years in the documentary film world. So, keep me on my track.
Okay, well, could we just start? I want to thank Broderick and Steen for all the hard work they've been doing. Could you all give them an applause for all their work, morning, noon, and night? Yeah. And I also think we should dedicate this to Peter one time.
Yes.
And I'll just mention one detail. I've got some clipboards that are going to pass around. I put out a distribution bulletin when something good happens in independent distribution, which is every few months, something does. I send it out, and it's right now about 9,000 filmmakers around the world are getting it. So if you'd like me to send it to you, just sign up, and I'll send it your way. And I'm also going to do a report that's based on the presentation I'm going to do today, and that'll have more detail and more links for you if you want to, get further information and access to some of the case studies. So I'd be happy for you to join the list if you'd like.
Yes.
So yeah.
Okay. When in the first year that I was in international sales, actually before the company started, it was like a year early in '81, we went for the first time to a market. Markets where buyers and sellers, mainly for television programming, went together, and we traveled by train from Amsterdam to Monte Carlo, and we traveled with two huge suitcases of pneumatic tapes. You remember the pneumatic tapes? These were the tapes that were big like this. And we had to hire, like, rent a machine there to play them, and it was just incredible. Now I'm walking around with a USB stick that has 8 gig on it, and it has the first 20 minutes of all our new films. Why I do this? People read a synopsis and they're interested in a subject. I believe that documentary buyers are primarily interested in subject matters, and they can take a look how the film starts and if the style of the film, if they like. So that's one of the elements of extraordinary change that we've gone through over the last 30 years.
Well, you've seen more changes, Jan, than probably anybody in this room.
Likely.
And I think sometimes understanding what's changed over those 31 years or so helps us understand where we are today, and then gives us a sense of how things are, maybe changing going forward. And I'm going to talk some about that. But so, what are some of the other big differences from the beginning till now?
When we started in the early 80s, I will tell you, I actually came before 80-something. It is 10 years of documentary distribution here in Holland. We had an outfit called Fugitive Cinema, which was many political documentary distribution company, and we worked with all kind of political action groups in the field to supply them with documentaries to work in the field.
I like that title,
Fugitive Cinema. Fugitive Cinema Holland. At that time there was, and this is interesting to look back, because at that time, early 70s, there was a bit of a sort of unorganized movement all over Europe to create filmmakers cooperatives. There was an atmosphere that the television was far away, the cinemas were totally impossible to deal with. So people started to organize themselves into filmmakers co-ops. We were linked to a filmmakers co-op in Amsterdam, and there were people in Hamburg, and there were people in London. There were all kind of groups, political groups in Paris, and we changed things. But there were no festivals really that dealt specifically with documentary films. There were the big film festivals. Berlin was already there. Cannes was already there, and Venice. And there was Oberhausen for short films, and that was about it. And there was no infrastructure whatsoever to market the films internationally. When I started to become a sales agent, a full-time sales agent in '82, there was maybe one other person that did work like this. That was Jane Balfour. You remember Jane Balfour from the UK. When I was in Malmö 2 months ago in Sweden, all the participants in the room were asked to present themselves per category. So all the sales agents, the documentary had to come on the stage. We were like 18. It was quite amazing. And the TV buyers had to come on stage, and there were 12. It was a bit of a problem.
Outnumbered.
So that is a huge thing. I mean, 30 years of history and a complete development of a very, very intense and well-organized infrastructure for documentary dealings, from production to development, from sales to co-productions. If somebody wants to spend a year of his or her life developing a project and has a little bit of pocket money to travel, you can go throughout the year to many, many events. I mean, I'm involved in a Polish production that is now finally getting into some kind of a shape that we can actually finish the film. We spent, with the filmmaker Hanna Polak, we spent a year and a half going from one place to the other place in order to meet really every single possible buyer that could come on board. And that is an incredible change. We get into other things a bit later.
Okay, at dinner last night, Jan revealed something about his past, but I don't know if it's a secret. But when Jan started out, he was representing fiction features as well as documentaries. And then at one key moment at Cannes, he went straight, and he's just doing documentaries since then.
Yes. I recall that moment very, very lively. We were. It's also an interesting remark because it changed. There was a period in time that it changed the entire industry a little bit. It was the period of time that what we called in the late 80s the mini majors. These were the companies like Miramax that people have heard of, maybe Sony Pictures Classics. You had the majors, then there were the little brothers that did the more artistic films and a little bit more fantasy in promoting them. And we all functioned in some kind of a margin of the market. And these guys basically gobbled up all that margin, and this very, very small fish like myself and other companies, we just basically fell off the plate. So at one point, I was in Cannes with a interesting but not that significant Canadian independent fiction film. I was actually with Catherine Leclay, who was also a sales agent here in documentary sales agent. And I was standing in front of the Star Cinema, and we have an industry screening that cost at the time 5,000 francs. It was like a lot of money for people like us to rent one screening, and 3 people show up for my industry screening. Now, my industry screening was actually booked at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is really good in France. But without telling us, put it at 2 o'clock, where everybody is at lunch. You know, so it's a nightmare, complete nightmare. So 3 people show up, a journalist from some faraway country, a festival that I'd never heard of. And a British buyer. I wanted the British buyer to see my movie, but he says to me immediately, I only have about 5 minutes, so I watched the beginning, and I'll talk to you later. So I looked at Catherine, I said to Catherine, Catherine, this is it. I have enough. I am just walking out of here, and went back to Montreal, packed all the fiction films in a big box, and shipped it back to the filmmakers, finished. And then I was very lucky. In the years that followed, I was able to represent some really big, strong documentaries of that time. Actually, and these films were a film like about Robert Crumb that many, many people have seen. There was the German production about Leni Riefenstahl, 4-hour piece that we sold all over the world. There was the Celluloid Closet, Rob and Jeffrey from San Francisco. Manufacturing Consent, Peter Wintonic from those days. And that moment in time really established this company on the map. And it was the same time that that infrastructure started to grow a little bit. I mean, the documentary festivals that existed at the time slowly started to build some, we call it like sales facilities. There was like a room where then the buyers and sellers could get together and there were little tables, and video machines came and slowly started to grow. And that resulted in these, I call it like almost like pitch circuses that we now have, very, very well established and very well run platforms, forums, where projects can be developed, pitched, and pre-sales to be had by broadcasters. That was my Cannes story.
So right now, things are good in some ways and hard in other ways. So what's gotten more difficult for you in terms of sales, and where do you see the opportunities? The
consequence of that new, quite elaborate infrastructure, the success of a number of documentaries in the cinemas in different countries, has created a level of popularity of the documentary genre. Broadcasters started to support documentary production. Broadcasters started to support and create strong primetime documentary strands over the years. And it resulted in a lot of people wanting to become a documentary filmmaker. So the numbers that we have to deal with out there have become quite enormous. And people like us, being a sales agent, we may get sometimes up to 20, 30 proposals, film proposals, fine cuts per week that we have to deal with. We hear stories about the major documentary strands at the big film festivals, like the Sundance has a documentary strand, Toronto has a documentary, Hot Dogs. The number of submissions that these festivals get is enormous. It's in the thousands. And then to get the attention by these programmers or these buyers for your film as an individual single filmmaker without that much experience is becoming quite tough. That is the major change. I mean, there are other issues. I mean, the broadcasters, if I look at the market, and there's different markets. There's broadcast, there's the cinema, there's the, you used to have the DVD, was quite popular. It still is a little bit on its way out. The new vague chaos of the online world, which is standing in front of us, and that he's going to talk about a little bit to help you through that. I always say that the only non-speculative market is the broadcast market. If you make a broadcast deal, it may sometimes take a little while to get paid because it may be a little bit bureaucratic, but you will get paid. any other market, you need intermediates, people that will bring you there, help you film there, and you'll be dependent on whoever comes and whoever clicks. That's the essence of it. And that in a market that is overfull, where there's a lot of competition among offerers, people who have films, either filmmakers or sales agents, becomes quite complicated. And then you see very, very slowly sort of a commercial mechanism start to work. I mean, people start to pick out films that think that they would work in their market, with certain elements in those films that work in their markets. And maybe sometimes the more interesting, the more intimate, and the more smaller films get a little lost.
Well, just talking about the TV sale, that's Jan's specialty. You can do other things too, but that's your specialty.
Well, I mean, I have sort of had to figure out over the years if you run a company on sales for documentaries, which is, if you look at the large market, if I go to the MIP or the MIPCOM, which are these big, huge broadcast markets in Cannes, I sit in my little stand for the week, for 4 days, and I'm not going to move out of my stand, because if I move out of my stand and I walk around in the market, I just have to throw up, because most of the broadcast market is just absolutely fucking awful. So being in a very small part of the market, which is a very, very small company, I have to make sure that I make enough money to run a company on. And that means I have to concentrate on broadcast sales, because the broadcast sale is still what I just said, the non-speculative market. I get paid. And many of those very, very good-willing people out there being distribution companies, it's a wait and see. And a lot of energy and a lot of time.
So just as a practical concern, let me make a distinction between two kinds of foreign sales. So in traditional foreign sales, you would sell all the rights to one territory, to one distributor. So that would include television, possibly theatrical, DVD, digital, educational. And in that situation, you'll get some advance. Sometimes. And you may never get any more money. So when you're selling TV separately, often the amount that you're going to get paid for TV is more than the advance on the all rights deal. Yeah. And so as Jan said, there's a number, and sooner or later you will get that money. Yeah. And there will be no expenses against the money. They'll just be the foreign sales company taking their percentage, and then you'll get the rest of the money. So it often makes more sense to make a TV sale in a territory, not make an all rights deal, even though those are offered. And then if there are opportunities to make other deals, okay, make them as well, but make sure you get that TV money in, because that's real.
So a long time ago, we figured it out in the sales business, and we made deals like we had an interest from a distributor in a country, a theatrical distribution company, and we said to him or to her, look, we'll give you the film for a very, very small advance, or maybe even no advance, but we'll keep the TV rights. And we figure out some kind of a window that they have a year time to roll out or to exploit the film in their territory. And then we do the TV sale, because we knew that if we do even a medium advance or a small advance for an all rights and all media deal, I mean, I tell you, I can tell you, I have 2 huge drawers with files in my office that I still don't know what to do with. These are percentage deals, revenue sharing deals that we've done over the years. It's a full-time goddamn job to go after these people. It's amazing. So we prefer to, and Peter's going to talk about that much more elaborately later, to go for a policy of splitting up rights. So at least we knew for the filmmaker that we make a TV sale after the fact for decent money.
And in terms of the team of people, I think all filmmakers need a distribution team. So there's some people that you may or may not need, but a foreign sales agent is someone you need. You cannot make those sales effectively yourself. A foreign sales agent has the connections and the contacts and the experience to know which buyers are going to work. So often what filmmakers do is they'll work with a foreign sales agent, and then after a year, or maybe not even a year, they'll make their film available online from their websites after you've made whatever TV sales you can make and whatever digital deals you can make. And so that's a combination that works, but you cannot sell your movie effectively around the world yourself.
One of the problems with the quantity of titles available on the market is that, and it's a bit of a frustration for me, because in the past it was really a little different. The life of a documentary in the hands of us is becoming relatively short. We see now situations where we bring a new film to IDFA, and the film can be seen in the video library, and there's like 25, my regular clients, TV buyers, are here. If they haven't seen it here and they see it again on my flyer in Cannes at the MIP TV, they will say to me, well, I've already read about this or saw it, whatever. What's new? So, and that's a very, very frustrating situation.
So that's from November to April.
I'm talking about 6 months' time, and we still pretend, and we still tell filmmakers that we can intensively work with their films over a half-year period, covering a number of markets. But sometimes it's very. I mean, I have an email from a filmmaker the other day of a film that I launched that I really, really like, and I pitched it everywhere, but it was a hard sell. Nobody wants to see it anymore. So that is really a real plus point to work with a sales agent knowing TV sales, because we are able to, if a TV buyer has like 50 DVDs in front of them, and now there's not even DVDs anymore, it's like somewhere, like a link, whatever.
Vimeo link.
We can get these people to pick out that DVD and see it tomorrow, if they have the time. Individual filmmakers do not have that access to these buyers.
So give us the off-the-record perspective on the kind of filmmaker you like to work with, in the sense of how they can be helpful to you in terms of either creating awareness or working on festivals, or what's the best combination for you?
The first step is that filmmakers who are interested in exploring foreign markets need to learn about the technical elements and the stuff that is needed to actually do that. That's really, really important. I mean, my company has a number of films in the festival here, and we have like 20 feature docs launched this fall. It took me months to get all the stuff ready, the synopsis, from the synopsis to the unmixed sound on a CD, the trailer. It's you have to find ways to learn what is needed to, and there are maybe you can Peter talk about things, websites where people explain these things a little bit. That's really, really important.
Talk about length in terms of what works and what you need.
If you make a feature documentary, we would always advise you to do at the same time in your post-production process TV length. And TV length, everybody says the magical 52 minutes, but in the end, it's like somewhere between 55, 56, whatever. That's it. All these hours are different on TV. If we get a TV hour which is 58, which is also fine. It should not be under the 50, it should not be over the 60. But do it at the same time. I'm sitting in front of a deal in my office where I'm having a Swedish television station cutting back 6 of our films to a 52-minute. Which is wonderful because they're good friends and they do a good job. And I tell the filmmakers, please, please, please trust them because they're really good people. What we then do in a case like this, we submit the cut to the filmmakers. And if the filmmakers hate it, which is always possible, we then say to the filmmakers, you will allow that deal to happen, but then we don't exploit that any further. But in many cases in the past, I mean, we had only one exception when it went really wrong. Many cases, people liked it, and it will save them a lot of time, a lot of money. But if you can, in your production process, do those things at the same time, wonderful. At the same time, a little demo or a trailer or a little peek, something you use for your websites.
So, Rian, are there like 25?
And then the third thing, please don't call me 5 times a day, please. I mean, I can tell you stories, you have no idea.
So are there 25 times as many slots for our documentaries as feature-length documentaries around the world?
I think you can safely say that. About slots, I could say 2 things. There are feature doc slots around. There are in most of the countries where, let's say, these types of documentaries are seen on television, they will have somewhere this feature slot. But the controllers, the people who are above the buyers, rarely allow these feature slots to play in prime time. So you'll see that you may get 2,000 euros more for a deal in Finland for a feature doc, but then it turns out it plays at 00:10 hours on a Wednesday night. And that's not a very good idea. The same film could play at a 9 o'clock or a 10 o'clock primetime slot on a Thursday, and it gets a fantastic audience. These are all serious broadcasters. They do a lot of online and on-screen promotion, but the feature slots are just no longer there where they maybe used to be sometimes in the past.
So the bottom line is, if you're serious about international distribution, you need an hour version of your film.
Yeah.
And one of the advantages to having an hour version in the US is that there's a very healthy educational market. And if you have an hour version that can show in a classroom, that's an advantage for you as well. So there's more than one use for that hour.
Yeah, the whole online world which is coming towards us doesn't really care about length. But anything which is what we then call in our jargon ancillary, which is the educational market, which is quite well developed in the US and occasionally in different countries developed in Europe, would need that sort of version. And that can actually give a film a very, very long life. Well, it has a very short life on television and other media, a long life in educational. And many docs are very good for that.
So tell us, in terms of the life cycle of a film, it's starting at festivals. So when do you want to be selling it? Do you want to wait until it's had some festival exposure? Do you want to wait until it's had some theatrical release somewhere and gotten some buzz, or do you want to have it from the very beginning?
We, in our company, for almost all the films that we take on, unless we have something that goes specifically to the television market for all kinds of reasons, the first discussion we have with filmmakers is to look at a career building. A career building meaning the what I call the launch pads and the A-list of film festivals. We just make a distinction in 4 categories of film festivals that we work with. And we find it very important because if we get those films in these slots, in these festivals, it makes them come float to the surface. And that's the key thing in the whole thing. How can you make your film come float to that surface of that sea of documentaries where you're part of? So what we do is we look at the 4 launch pads. These are the places our first interest. In the calendar year, that is Sundance. It has a very strong documentary presence in 2 different competitions and also sidebar programs, American documentary, international documentary. Then the Berlin Film Festival in February, that has also in 2 of the sections relatively strong documentary presence. Then we go to the fall, where there's the Toronto Film Festival, which is a very big, glitzy event, but has a very strong documentary strand through the festival, very, very well programmed. And then there's IDFA as the 4th one in the calendar year. And if we get a film at a certain point, the first thing we look is at the calendar and say, where are we now? What is already done? What has been done? How far is the film in its production? Where can we just start the career? And that's really the first thing we do. And then around these things, we can possibly know a film goes to IDFA, but 6 weeks before IDFA, we are at MIPCOM, where we can just tell the buyer what's coming. So they know already that the film will be in a very prestigious start point later. So it is all a little bit intertwined, but that public appearance point of departure is really important.
So the 2 key television markets that Jan has mentioned, one is in April and one is in October.
Yeah, these are these things they're called MIP TV, Marché International de Production de Télévision. And the other one is in October, MIPCOM, and nobody knows why it's called MIPCOM, because they didn't want to call it MIP TV2 or something like that. And these are just huge trade fairs. Trade fair is the best word for it. Huge building, 15,000 people, 98% junk, and we are somewhere in the 2%. The interesting thing is that MIP TV, the one in the spring, decided 5, 6, 7 years ago to do a video library in the 2 days before the market starts on a Monday morning, 9 o'clock. And on the Saturday and the Sunday is this video library, which is very well organized, big catalog, all around the television program. It's from wildlife to entertainment, but only documentary. And we put all our films there, and the buyers are sitting there for 2 days, very high discipline, and they watch all our films.
Wow.
That's a very important tool for us. I mean, our continuous task is to get 2 things. We need face-to-face time with the buyers, the TV buyers, but also distribution companies and other companies, and we need to show our films. And increasingly, because of the numbers, we hear stories about we send 6, 7, 8 DVDs still, or links to a buyer in Finland or whatever, and then we hear later from the buyer, I actually didn't see them, but we have somebody who sees those films. So this is somebody who gets sent in a room with like a box full of DVDs with some parameter, what they're looking for, and that is really tricky for people like us also, because we have no control anymore over how our films are seen. So we prefer our films to be seen in these contexts and settings like IDFA here, where we can actually silently walk into the video booth section and just tap them on the shoulder.
So, Jan, how much can you help a filmmaker get into a major festival, do you think? Is that you're calling it to the attention of...
Well, it's what I earlier said. I mean, you know, we never speak about those things publicly, but we can call certain people. We can never take the decision for them, but we can bring, and also it's a matter of trust. If I phone somebody from the IDFA team a few months ahead, it's putting the film on people's radar. And then, because it comes from people like us, and we have a good relationship, they trust us. I mean, what is really tricky in our business, in the sales business, is you should really learn what the other party wants and not bullshit these people and not bother them with things that don't fit. I mean, I would never take a festival programmer to see something that I know for sure is never going to work. So that trust relationship is really important.
So looking forward, what are some of the points that you think filmmakers should understand in terms of, you know, maximizing their distribution?
Well, I mean, if you look at the whole history, and where I started my story about the filmmakers co-ops in the end of the 60s and the early 70s, I think that we're getting back to it almost like a crazy full circle. Well, I think personally that it's becoming more and more important that filmmakers get involved in the distribution of their own film. And some of you guys will not have the time and the money, but then you can maybe find somebody else who can do it for you. But instead of just giving it away or signing away long deals and just the film disappears, get more and more involved. And Peter will explain all kind of techniques and possibilities that are now available to a lot of people, which were not available like 10 years ago. It was just absolutely not there. I think that's an important development. And because the technology around film, the files and the computers is getting complicated, be very up to speed about these things. And I mean, I honestly have a hard time understanding sometimes some of these delivery stuffs that we get asked for by these crazy broadcasters. I mean, oh my God. A few years ago, we went to, we called our lab, and we said, is there anybody at the lab who can just get me and my assistant Johnny for an hour and explain to us what HD is all about? So we went to the lab a couple of days later, and this guy comes in the room, and the first thing he says that you guys thought that with HD everything becomes more simpler. Forget it. There are like 18 different sorts of HD, you know, and then the TV stations are, I mean, the distribution companies are a little easier because in the end now they'll send them a big file and they'll figure out what to do with the file. But TV stations in their own country are lobbied by technology companies, and they end up all wanting different standards because they've been lobbied by commercial companies, and they make bribe deals, God knows what. And in Sweden wants something different than Finland. I mean, why? I mean, it's the same image, the same good quality image, same good quality sound. No, it's a fucking different tape, excuse me the words. And that is a nightmare because for us it's a nightmare in the logistics, but for the filmmakers indirectly it's a cost level. It's a huge cost level, because if we invest in that stuff, if you guys don't have the money to provide that to us as a sales tool, it's a deductible. So if you make a sale to Finland for 3,000 euros and there's like 2,000 euros worth of tape stuff that goes there on loan, they don't buy it from you, no, on loan, there you go.
Okay. Well, let's talk about splitting up rights for a minute.
Yeah.
In my experience, more and more filmmakers are splitting up rights. A few years ago, someone asked me, what percentage of filmmakers who make traditional deals, and that's giving all your rights to one company for 10 years or 15 years, what percentage of those filmmakers end up happy? It's a great question. I thought about it for about 30 seconds.
Do I have to answer that?
30 seconds. And I said, I think 3% would be a big number. And the other 97% are somewhere between apoplectic and mildly dissatisfied. If you ask me the question today, I would say it's maybe 2%. And this is based on working with lots of filmmakers over a number of years. So it's not that that traditional deal couldn't work. It's just the likelihood that you're going to end up satisfied with your distribution in that situation is much, much lower. So do you want to kind of...
Well, the only thing I totally agree with you. I mean, if you look at, I mean, it's a bit of another advice. If you look at distribution companies and there are people interested in your film for a certain territory, for a certain number of different rights, I mean, the first thing you do is go to their website and look what they have. I mean, if you get solicited and day and night phone calls by a company who really, really, really wants your film, and you go to the website and they only have wildlife, there's a problem. And I've seen over the years, because the documentary becoming more and more popular, all kind of weird companies who all of a sudden become interested in documentary. You see that now in the online world. I get emails almost every day by all kind of fly-by-night companies who I've never ever heard of, who tell me by email that they're so incredibly interested in documentaries. And most of the emails I don't even reply, I just ignore.
And the second thing...
So familiarize yourself.
Yeah, and the next step after you go to their websites and see if they've got any films you've ever heard of or that are vaguely related to your film, is to talk to filmmakers that have actually worked with those companies. That's where you'll get the real information, as their honesty, their accessibility, their effectiveness. Filmmakers will tell you, and there's no other way to get that information, not in the trades and not from their brochures.
No, this is what Peter just said, this is really, really essential. We also advise that all the time. If you go to the catalog, go to the website catalog and find somebody who worked with them. Very, very important.
So you want any last thing to say before our...
The last thing to say. Let me see if there's a last thing to say. I don't know. I think we should listen to Peter, and maybe afterwards we have a little discussion.
Okay.
All right?
Great.
I'm going to sit on the side.
Okay.